Thank you so much for providing us such an impressive review of the work that went into the development of the second Regional Climate Action Plan over this last year. It's certainly a reflection of the efforts of many individuals and testament to the collaboration here in the region, and presents for us a pretty significant but tangible, achievable regional list of the to-do items over our next 5 years. So we look forward to poring over that. We'll now transition to the summit's morning panel session titled County Governments as Resilience Leaders. This session is moderated by Mr. Dan Lindblade. He is the president and CEO of the Greater Fort Lauderdale Chamber of Commerce, where he has been a steady advocate for economic resilience through adaptation planning and active participation of the business community. And truly, he has been a vital partner in preparing for this year's summit. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Lindblade and our panelists, the county administrators, who oversee the collection of activities undertaken via the compact and our individual counties. Thank you. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Jennifer. Administrators, you want to come on up and join me? It's a great deal of pleasure for me to be here with you this morning. And as the administrators come up, I'll draw your attention to where they're located within your program. I have a kind of a standing rule that I don't read bios and whatnot when you have them right in your program. So on page 21 is Virginia, page 30 is Roman, page 34 is Bertha, and page 42 is Jack. And they're all here with us today. You know, one of the things that I was listening to some of the scientists, and I have a few scientists in my family too, administrators, and one of them works at the National Center for Atmospheric Research. He's been there a long time. And I was thinking about this issue for the last 2 years. I've been at the Chamber for 10 years as its CEO. And I was thinking about, in the scale of things, as an administrator in your history, and you all have lengthy careers as administrators, but in the scale of all of the issues that you face, where does this rank within those issues? And let's start with Roman first. Roman, where does this rank in your list of issues that you have to deal with year after year?
First of all, thank you for having me here. When you say this, what is this?
Resiliency,
okay, thank you.
Climate change, capital investments.
It ranks at the top two. Public safety, public health is first, and then definitely everything we do now, we consider resiliency, we consider our sea level rise. We have various plans that we're looking at now. We have a program, and so it's definitely, it's overarching everything we do, and we consider it and I'll get into it, some of the things that we're doing.
So first on your list, how about you, Virginia?
It is very important. It's one or two right at the top, because it's integrated within all of the other aspects that we have to deal with. Public safety, ensuring that we've got proper equipment, our buildings are hardened so that we can address any of the issues we're having to deal with, stormwater. So there are a number of factors that we integrate throughout our, restoring our capital infrastructure. So it is number one or two at the top of our list as well.
How about you, Jack?
We went to the extent of making our budget a resiliency budget 2 or 3 years ago, and we used the budget process as a way of deciding what needs to get done in order and when. And so if it's not an issue that we have marked, and of course, there's the things that keep going on every day, but if it's not a issue that we've marked, it's not ranked very high. That's both in operation and in capital.
Thanks, Jack. Bertha, how about you?
So it's clearly ranked high, and it has been for quite some time, thanks to our elected leadership. If I go back to the very first summit where Kristen Jacobs was very much in the forefront of pushing these issues. And then each year thereafter, more and more of my elected body members took on this challenge because they could see what everyone else is seeing. And then add to that, you have Dr. Gerardo. And so when you have someone who is as passionate about this issue, it cannot take a backseat to anything that you're doing. So very high on our list.
Now, this is my first summit. We've been really what I would call scraping the surface of this issue as a business community only recently. We're really late to the dance, I would say, and we're engaging on it. And I was particularly struck with the map of the United States previously, and how many people don't think resiliency, climate change, global warming will impact them. And I think some of it has to do with just being able to wrap your arms around it as a human being. And as my brother would say, well, I'll be dead before that hits me. So I don't have to deal with it. It'll be somebody else's problem. But I look at this as a legacy issue for us to move forward. Speaking of particularly the business industry, and Jack, let's start with you. What do you feel that the business community's role is in this issue? And how can it better engage with government to support your efforts? How would you like to see that relationship grow?
We've been very fortunate to have an opportunity to work with insurance and the reinsurance folks, and who've looked at Miami-Dade as an example of what's going on. So that's given us one level of activity as the process looks for a new development that's going on in Miami-Dade. Dealing with the business community through their organizations. You know, we're constantly having staff out with organizations, developers, constructors, the chamber, all kinds of folks to be there to answer questions and to make presentations. So we work with that, and that has had a huge impact as we start to look at things like our plan, our comprehensive plan down the road, what we're going to have to do with the building department's activities. The pushback has not been what could easily been, because they've become part of this process, and we've been very happy with the way that's worked.
Yeah, I think Miami-Dade in general, from a business perspective, from my conversations with colleagues down there, has been ahead of maybe Broward and Palm Beach County, Monroe. You've been dealing with a lot. And I should ask you, Roman, how are things down in Monroe before we go any further? Give us an update if you wouldn't mind.
Well, it's been a long 3 months. We're getting better every day. Thank you for asking. You know, Monroe County is a very long county. It's 120 miles long. There is an area, Big Pine Key in the Middle Keys and the Lower Keys, that took the hardest hit. And that area is still hurting, and it's going to be a while before they get up and going. But Key West is doing fine. If anybody has any vacation plans to go anywhere other than the Keys, cancel them and come down to the Keys. We need you guys to come down to the Keys and start spending.
Amen to that. How's your business community engaging right now? What kind of role have they been playing?
Key West is coming back strong. They didn't get hit very hard. They were on the clean side of the storm, so they're back and running. The Upper Keys is doing well. Still, about 70% of the hotels in Islamorada are closed, so we need to get those going. One's going to open tomorrow, which is great. So seriously, we need folks to come down and help us out, get back up and running. But we're doing okay. It's getting better every day.
So talk to me about, if you will, what you see as the role of the business community outside of recovery efforts, but actually moving forward and working hand in hand with government, and what role do you see them playing, or are they playing with you down there right now?
Well, Jack touched upon it as far as the building and the building departments. We still have an adversarial relationship with some businesses and some contractors. But I got to tell you, after this storm, many of them have come up to me and said, wow, the new standards work. You know, you see it. You see the new building, they're doing fine. The metal roofs, the concrete roofs, they did fine. So folks are understanding what we've been saying all along. And Charlie Danger, some of us old timers remember Charlie Danger from
Absolutely.
Building Official after Andrew. You know, wherever he is, and I said this at one of the TV shows, and And he was in Portugal, of all places, and I guess somebody told him about it, and he texted me. You know, he's a hero, because what he's done for the building code of the state, and it works. It really works. So I think the building community understands it now. They see it. It's clear as you drive up and down the Keys, the newer buildings versus the older buildings, the elevated buildings, the ones to the new standards, the new standards work, and it's clear.
What about you, Bertha? You've dealt with a lot of business leaders over the years. Currently, you're in conversations with everyone from the Broward Workshop to the Alliance to the Chambers. How do you feel about the relationship and where we're headed?
I think the relationship is wonderful. As a matter of fact, we all know that at the heart of this is the issue. The issue is funding, and oftentimes government, when you're starting to have dialogue with your federal and state partners, as a local government, you usually don't have as much influence as some of the members of the business community. But when you have a united business community that will en masse go to Washington, D.C. or go to Tallahassee and walk the halls of government, larger governments, to really talk through what it is we're trying to do in our community and really push our significant funding partners to, hey, don't forget what we're trying to do down here. It has proven absolutely invaluable, and we do appreciate that.
Do you have any ballpark estimate of the cost over the next 30 years that we'll have to pay for some of these?
Well, I can tell you that it's in the billions when you start to deal with the county, and when I say county, I'm talking about the canal systems, a lot of the, Dr. Hankel talked about the infrastructure that's 100 years old, and climate change, which is accelerating. So you have, with our water management district and other partners, there's just a lot to be done. There's a lot of resources that will have to come to bear along with all of our planning. So to say that if I have has there been a comprehensive number when you look at what municipalities are dealing with their water and sewer systems and the like? I don't have a number, but I do know when the county itself starts looking at these issues, it's in the billions.
Virginia, are you on an October fiscal year?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So your budget is passed for 2017, 2018.
Correct.
And moving forward, will this become a larger appropriation as you see it? And furthermore, how are you ramping up your staff structure to deal with this issue? So 2 questions, the money part and then the staffing part, please.
Which goes pretty much hand in hand. As in Palm Beach County, we're fortunate. We were able to work with our business community and partner with them to move not only our elected officials forward, but to help us move other business people that were not on board, as well as our residents, to support our penny sales tax to help with the renewal and replacement, along with building other new structures to deal with resiliency and the change in climate that we're having, the sea level rise. And we actually put different infrastructure needs into the ballot language so that our residents would understand this is what we're doing. So it plays a vital role in our budgeting process. We're looking at renewal and replacement. We've got a lot of infrastructure that we need to replace, and we're taking into consideration ensuring that we're building toward the future, knowing that from '04, which I personally started having experience dealing with the aftermath of hurricanes through now, knowing that we need to adjust for our drainage system, our bridges, along with even housing, which is part of resilience as well. And so our business community has definitely partnered with us, and I agree with Bertha. They have a bigger impact when we go to Tallahassee and Washington for additional funding. They also have a bigger impact when we're trying to deal with the Corps and dealing with Lake Okeechobee, which is a constant issue that we must deal with, not only for Palm Beach County, but South Florida as a whole. We have created our Office of Resiliency. We created that a number of years ago. We lost our director to the private sector. I wish you guys would stop poaching my people from public sector. But she was awesome, so we're in the process now of a replacement. We've assigned some additional positions. We also have a Department of Environmental Resource Management that assists us. And it has become part of we've got policies in our comprehensive plan as well as our code, our zoning code, that requires certain things. So we are very focused on ensuring that we're building for the future.
Do you think you're properly prepared right now?
No, I don't think we'll ever be totally properly prepared because the climate and conditions continue to change, and we as government must adapt to those changes, as the speaker talked about earlier this morning.
Yeah, I think that's the big item for me. I know I'm not properly prepared, and so that's why I'm coming to meetings like this. That's why I'm talking to really bright individuals like Dr. Gerardo and making sure that that information comes back. As a matter of fact, and I'll share this with the group, we made this as a focal point for our strategic plan as a business organization. So if you haven't made this a pillar of your future endeavors and you aren't dedicating resources, that's definitely something you need to do. I know there's a lot of government officials in here, and that's the core group that we have, but for business leaders, we need to gather on this. And as a matter of fact, we're going to have a business gathering here tomorrow. We're going to also participate in the signing. We aren't going to be signing, but we are participating and going to comment on the compact's joint efforts moving forward, and we want to make sure that we're all rowing in the same direction, I always say. Jack, I've known you for a long time. I mean, I've known you since I started back in the early 90s in South Florida. And as it relates to this issue, or these issues, there's a myriad of issues. And when I say issue, there's a lot more than just any given issue. But what's the one that concerns you the most, and why?
I believe that the way that we're going to deal with the short-term future is like all governments do in the short-term future, and that's dealing with the budget. So we focus what we're trying to deal with, even along capital plans, but making sure that you look at the services you provide and ask yourself over and over again, is this a function of our resiliency? It's amazing how few items you can say no to with that question. Then there's the longer term issues like we're redoing our water and sewer system. It's 1,400 miles of water and sewer lines under Miami-Dade County. I can't imagine where, but and it's going to cost us $13, $14 billion by the time it's done. Everything that needs to get rebuilt is looked at from certainly a resiliency and its location and how it's built, and then the things that we're redoing, how long are they going to last, and how much do we want to put in them, and that ranking between the length of time it's going to last in our evaluation and the amount of money we put in. And then because we're moving, initially, like many of us on the east coast of Florida, a lot of our wastewater systems are on the eastern edge of the county. All of that's got to move to the western edge. Well, that's fun, except for the water and sewer lines that now flow this way now have to flow this way. So these are huge changes in that, but they are the fundamental issues that we provide to the business community so that they can grow and prosper. And without that kind of activity, we're going to find ourselves in trouble, not only with the federal government, but with our constituents who keep saying, we need more water system, we need more sewer systems. That's just one item of 100 items that we need to deal with.
Roman,
I'd like to add to that.
yeah, go ahead, please.
I think my biggest concern, and I'm going to throw you a curveball here, is term limits. And I think term limits are really affecting some of these decisions. I'm very lucky. We have a commissioner that's been around 20 years, the mayor around 10 years or so. another commissioner, all of them are in the double digits, or else getting close to double digits, and there is no term limits. So they're going to stick around, they're making decisions for the long term. You all have term limits, and it gets even worse at the state level because they make decisions to stay elected every 2 years, every 4 years. So we're making decisions that are 10, 20, 30 years out, and sometimes the elected officials just aren't wired to think that way because they need to get reelected. So they're making a decision that's something that's going to benefit the next, generation. So I'm really worried about that. And again, I'm very fortunate. We're in a good place in Monroe County, but some of the communities at the state level too is a problem, term limits.
What about you, Bertha? What keeps you up at night?
Well, you have to look at what are you experiencing right now. And right now, we're experiencing a lot of flooding. We have communities, clearly there are times when they're not able to go home. I mean, you are impacted and you're frustrated, and as government officials, whether it's at the county level or city level, you know that in order to really deal with that issue, it's going to take a lot, and it's going to take a lot of activity that needs to happen right now. Hurricanes also have a major thing. It keeps me up. When I think about how we dodged a bullet, Maria didn't come our way. Irma started our way and did a shift, and I'm not embarrassed to say I was blowing it to the west, and I do apologize to those of you that may be from the western portions of this state. But one of the things that we saw, and I listened to some of the dialogue on a lot of our calls, again, when people, when they wait to evacuate and they're trying to move in this linear state in a region that's 7-8 million people, when you add visitors on top of it, it's very difficult. You're trying to always be ahead. We have people criticize, they say, well, we think the county pulled the trigger too soon with respect to opening up shelters. And oftentimes you ask yourself, do they really understand how many people live in this region? And if we waited to the last minute to ask people to move west from the east, how long that would take? So hurricanes and the veracity of what we're seeing now, the flooding that we can anticipate at any given time. The rainy season is kind of difficult to even predict now, because you used to be able to know what the rainy season, when it was going to occur, and now all of a sudden it's raining all the time, or it's really dry all the time. So it's the unpredictability of what is happening and how we can respond adequately to those issues, and what that means to the residents and the visitors and that spend time in our communities.
Virginia?
Well, what keeps me up is what Bertha and the rest of the speakers have talked about, and that is really the unknown. Attempting to be prepared for hurricane season, you dust off your rules and regulations. You get prepared to address storms that may impact you. But outside of hurricanes, you also have tropical storms. And we had a tropical storm. I walked to lunch one day, which is a couple of blocks down from the office. It was nice and sunny. We went in, it started to rain, and it just never stopped. It was Tropical Storm Isaacs, and we had significant flooding in the Midwest portion of our county. Not necessarily the eastern portion, but the Midwestern. And so it was a matter of, pulling staff together, and John Van Arnhem, which is my deputy county administrator, is here, took a major lead in ensuring that we garnered enough equipment, the high trucks and boats, and working with Fish and Wildlife and all of our other partners so that we could go out and make sure people were safe, or get them medication or get them out to hospitals, because really we had some issues with our fire rescue responding in certain areas. So just ensuring that, number one, our residents are well informed, they're prepared when we first get an inkling there is something that we should be prepared for, such as unexpected rainfall or hurricanes coming, ensuring they've got their medication, et cetera. The other thing that keeps me up at night, especially now in Palm Beach County, is the lack of affordable workforce housing, which is a significant factor in ensuring that you've got a viable, a resilient community, that when you do have storms or unexpected incidents occur, when your people have to leave the county, they come back. And so that's a factor that we are working with our business community very closely on in addressing that particular issue.
Jack?
I think there's one issue that we all deal with and we all sort of talk about, but we don't talk about enough. And that is the fact that this region goes from Palm Beach all the way down through the Keys. If you don't think that our workforce is migrating back and forth, ride with me someday from Hollywood to Miami and say, where are all these people going? They're going to work. Ride home with me and then see the other side of people that are going the other way. The transportation system is a wonderful way of understanding where your workforce is and where they're headed. I'm saying that because these issues, a lot of, especially the bigger issues, cannot be resolved by one of us working together, no matter how much money we've got to spend. We have to make sure that we understand how we're affecting each other, you know, you got to deal with people like Bertha, whether you like it or not. You know, and we have to be able to sit down and say, okay, Bertha, what are we going to do about this and this and this? This is something we do all the time. We don't do it enough, though. And I don't know, I said, I wish we could have spent more time trying to help in the Keys. Tell them what you said.
You guys were great. I mean, you helped a lot. All three of you helped a lot. Police officers, firefighters, first responders, you guys were fantastic.
And see, that's the kind of, that made my day.
Yeah.
Because that's the kind of stuff that we need to be able to do and not have to worry about, do we understand that no matter what, he needs help, we need to respond. And then as we start spending money, we need to make sure that the money we're spending ties together with the people that we deal with. You know, we're not building stuff for inside of Miami-Dade County. We have to do more than that. So I think that this organization is great because they have recognized the 4 counties for a long time on this issue, and it's got national and international recognition for that. But I think we all ought to think about that for all the issues of resiliency, not just, you know, climate change and sea level rise.
It was really good to hear folk in New York, and I'm just going to tell, recently we had a visit with some of the rating agencies on some issues, and they have papers out now that's, it's clear for many regions in this country that's going to be a new factor that they're considering when they look at rating bonds and the like. And the good news is that because we have this regional compact and they can see that we are not just sitting around waiting for things to happen, that we're really changing our codes and we're modifying our budget processes, we're identifying all of our vulnerabilities and working on them, that's going to bode well for us. And the fact of the matter is, again, we go back to this issue of money. We certainly, if we can keep the cost of borrowing down, that's going to help us with our investment. So needless to say, we were all a little frustrated as we were evaluating the tax plan, and this isn't a political statement, this is just reality. If you are going to have as a high priority infrastructure funding or infrastructure development in this country, And the communities at the very lowest level are struggling to find the dollars to invest in infrastructure, and you're considering changing the tax code such that these funding sources that we really, local governments really, and state governments to that effect, we depend on, that you're now going to make the cost of borrowing more expensive. You know, sometimes you wonder, you know, who are you really linking your policies and practices together? But we were pushing that issue, and hopefully somebody's listening in Washington.
So since I have the mic and Bertha is my county administrator, I want to point out that I was sitting in my office on 3rd Avenue several months ago, and I get a call from Washington, D.C., I think, and it's an editor of a magazine, and they wanted to interview me about Bertha's expertise. And I said, well, why are you calling me? And they said, well, Bertha is the 2017 Public Official of the Year by Governing Magazine. So, speaking of intergovernmental relations as it relates to cities, municipalities, county government, state government, and federal government, and let's focus specifically on state government. What do you all feel the state government's role is, and do you think that they are in a current position that is supportive, or what could they do better? And whoever wants to grab that one and run with it.
I'll start. Well,
Better you than me.
yeah. And I think I'm moderating the state elected officials panel in an hour or so. So, first of all, you know, in Monroe County, we generate, and compared to these 3 counties, it's nothing, but for us, it's a lot of money. $200 million that we send up to Tallahassee in tax revenue every year. By formula, we get about 20 back. If we do nothing, only 20 comes back, 10%. So for us to be able to continue to send that $200 million back, we need to invest in our infrastructure. We need to have proper infrastructure so folks will visit. So we've been going up for the last 4 or 5 years. We have an intergovernmental affairs department now, and we've been very fortunate. We've gotten about $191 million back additional in the last 5 years. So they're understanding. I think when you get up there and you explain the situation to them, it works. So that's why we have such a robust, we hire, between us and the municipalities, every lobbyist is on board. I mean, we have everybody, you know, like it or not, it's the way it works, and it's been very successful. So we spend probably between us and all the municipalities about $400,000, $500,000, something like that. So, you know, that's your return. You're spending $400,000 or $500,000, but you're getting millions back, so it's a good return on investment. So, and again, you have to get up there and explain the situation to them so you get some of that money back. So that's what we're doing.
So do you all feel, and anyone can answer this, do you all feel that the state government is appropriating enough dollars and distributing them wisely as it relates to resiliency? I'm not trying to bait the question
That is
too
a
much.
loaded question that you're asking.
Yeah, I'm really trying to gauge where
thought
we
we were
are in that
friends.
relationship right now.
I'll take a stab at it.
You go ahead.
I ain't saying nothing. I need to work.
I believe that we need to continue to improve our dialogue with our legislators in Tallahassee, because some of the policies being made ties our hands. We're not necessarily getting the funding that we need for infrastructure and other needs within our locale, but yet you're putting a cap on how much we in our individual jurisdictions should raise in taxes. You're also now putting out a vote for a additional 25,000 homestead exemption that is going to be a statewide initiative. And counties that are not necessarily impacted with as many people as we have in South Florida will vote and tell us what we can and cannot do in our county. Our residents, when educated, make the vote they want. And in Palm Beach County, we pride ourselves on our quality of life. So they have voted for 150 million agricultural and preservation, and in addition to environmentally sensitive lands. They voted for cultural and recreational bonds. They voted for, just recently, 1-cent sales tax. And so I believe that local home rule should remain local and not necessarily dictated from Tallahassee. I also believe that if you're going to require government to provide services over and above what we have decided locally what we need to do for our residents, that you should associate the funding to go with it so that we can reduce the unfunded mandates that are constantly being placed on local government.
So I have one of my board members who is very, very active right now in Tallahassee on the affordable housing issue. And she's picked up the banner from, now my mayor, who's got a lot more responsibilities, as you can imagine. But again, the business community told us this is a real recruiting issue in this state. The local communities have been crying for quite some time in this region, and I can't even imagine how you're dealing with it in the Keys. But we've been crying for quite some time. If this state is going to continue to prosper, and the state is unwilling, or if I would say unwilling, but if the state has found other priorities beyond that which would clearly is having an impact in other regions of this state, there is a trust fund, we refer to it as the Sadowski Act, but it's a trust fund that was established to assist communities with affordable housing. It's a big issue here. And each year, and one of these days I'll figure out since when, so sometime in the mid-2000s, the state figured out that it can sweep that and use it for other priorities. So for all these years, when the initial intent was to make sure that there was sufficient affordable housing in this state, the money is being used for other things, because the state has determined that it has other priorities. But those priorities will quickly come into conflict. If you're talking about jobs, if your focus is jobs, 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 if you keep pushing the jobs, 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 and you're not dealing with where you're going to house these people when they're here, or how are they going to move about to get to those jobs, there's a disconnect, again, in our policies. So I think that there needs to be more discussion at the state level, tying all of their policies together to see what they're doing to adversely affect a policy that they say, or they have set aside to deal with in this state.
Okay, well, yeah, you can clap. You can clap. This is an opportunity for our audience to ask a question or two. And remember that these folks, collectively, they represent, depending on who you talk to, either the 9th or the 10th or the 11th largest economy in the United States. So I would recognize Ina Lee, because she's always the first one to ask a question. So Ina.
Thank you, Ina.
You're welcome. First of all, the name of this conference is called Climate Change. And we're talking about the federal government and the state government, clearly. And yet you have leaders of those two entities that don't even use that word. So clearly, and I think Rosemary asked the question, it's been a theme of how much billions of dollars this is going to take. So my question to you is, where is the money really going to come from? Because it's not coming from the feds that I can see. The chamber created the Washington Summit. Several people in this room went there. It's clearly not a priority there. And I don't see it's a priority at the state level. So how are we going to impact feds and state on this issue that's going to cost multi-billions of dollars, and then bringing it down to the local level. You passed the infrastructure tax. We haven't done anything in Broward. So where's the money going to come from? This is really, as I've been delving into this with Dr. Gerardo and other people over the last year, that's what I come down to. Clearly it's happening. Now what?
Okay, so we've got the tax that was passed up in Palm Beach County. What other opportunities are there? Bonding capacity? Let's talk a little bit about that.
The issues that we have found was that when you go to Tallahassee and you talk about climate change and sea level rise and resiliency, that doesn't sing.
Right.
So we talk about water and sewer systems and transportation systems, and we use the existing programs to chase money for jobs and redevelopment. I think it's, and I'm not trying to say we're trying to be sneaky, we're trying to be truthful. I spent 8 years in Tallahassee, most of which I was a deputy state budget director, so I clearly know what it's up against to try to fund this urbanizing state with a non-urbanizing budget. But we have to deal with the issues, at least with us in Miami-Dade, on a system-by-system basis, and we have to be the one that puts that together.
Question over here.
Hi, I wanted to ask a question about housing and climate change. And I think that it's important that we have assessment about the impact that climate change have in minority community and communities that they're working poor. It's important then that somehow we take into account that if there is no investment in affordable housing, do they have any investments about adaptation and resilience for people that need affordable housing that is not just climate gentrification? So I think that we have to rethink also about issues when a heat wave come. Are we using cooling center, and what is the plan when we have heat at night and during the day, and then that probably people will be there more time than what is expected? I just wanted to know if it's a plan for dealing with those issues. Thank you.
I'm very fortunate in that my county commission has invested in its park system tremendously. And if you look at some of the enhancements and improvements, and this is to deal with cooling stations and the like, all of our facilities have major community centers associated with them with air-conditioned blasting when it's really, really hot. Our parks are full of trees. We work really hard to make sure that there are places people can go to get respite. We have water stations for children to play. So there are the things that we would normally do, and I think all of the partners here have indicated that you really have to build into whatever you do today. You have to think about resiliency, you have to think about climate change, and you have to think about how would you modify or your designs of whatever it is that you're doing to take that into consideration. It really, I would say 10 years ago, we had all of our managers trained to watch the budget, watch the dollars, and a lot of the things that you would normally do that you're doing today, back then, they start looking at the cost-benefit ratio, and no one was really factoring in long-term what the cost-benefit ratio would look like. So now that we're changing the vernacular within our own team, how do you think about when you are replacing your structures? How do you go about making sure that you insert resiliency and that you're able to talk about the cost benefit that inures from that? And it requires a constant conversation. You know, my elected officials, just about every other Tuesday, someone, did you put a solar roof on that project? So it's there, and it's in the psyche and the conscience of all of our people. So if we continue to do that and push that, you start where you are. You start building a momentum, and hopefully the folks in Washington and Tallahassee will see that there is something to it. We're able to show that when we built those dunes, and a lot of people really didn't want their beach view obstructed with these dunes, but when they were able to see where we built those dunes, we didn't have the devastation and the destruction of many of our affordable housing and other road networks and the like as a result of that. So sometimes it's just, we just got to show you.
Last question, we got 2 minutes.
During Hurricane Irma, we obviously faced some significant issues with cranes in our downtown areas. Of course, we want to continue growing and not stifle those things, but how do you balance that with also ensuring the public safety, not only personal safety, but investments in for homeowners and things like that? How do you balance those things as we face more extreme weather due to climate change with also ensuring the public safety during those extreme times?
Who wants it?
We don't have any cranes in the keys.
It's a
Well,
public,
Clearly not for me.
it's a public safety issue. I mean, that's how you look at it, and you got to make sure that you learn by what we learned from Irene and what we're going to Irma, and what we're going to sit down and how we're going to change things. Will it cost more money? Probably. No, but what's the cost of not doing it? And just like all government requirements that are public safety issues, you got to be careful what you're doing. You don't want to overcreate, but you want to make sure that, as far as you know, you're as safe as you can get.
We got a business panel coming up next. That'd be a good question for them. I know Mr. Palmer from Stiles is here, so he'll be happy to answer that. But ladies and gentlemen, our county administrators, let's thank them. Thank you very much.
Let's.
All right, thanks, everyone. So now we'll break for 20 minutes for coffee and refreshments that'll be served in the lobby. During your break and over the next 2 days, we'd like to encourage you to visit the sponsors and the exhibits out there. Also make a point when you return to make sure you grab a seat rather than standing in the doorway. We're getting some concerns about safety. So we'll see you back in 20 minutes. Enjoy the break. Thanks.